I want to welcome you back. This is our first show for the new year. Veterans for Peace Forum. It was in the studios of Metro East Community TV or Community Media. And my producers, Kelly Labonte and Jim Lockhart, we have some new equipment here. So if there are any bugs, we're still learning on how to run some of the equipment, but it is really, really nice out here. Today I have a guest with me. He's an Iraq veteran, Jeff Shoemaker, and also a conscientious objector. As you may know, my name is Dan Shea. I'm with Veterans for Peace, and one of the things about Veterans for Peace, I hope people will check our website. We'll put that up on the screen from time to time. If you want to find out what's happening locally about veterans and what we're doing, it's a good place to check with us. There it is, Veterans for Peace, Chapter 72. And our website is up there, www.vfpchapter72.org. That's a good place to check out what we're doing, where we have our meetings. Usually we have our meetings every second Tuesday of the month at the First Unitarian Church downtown. And so if you're interested, please check the website and contact us. We'd love to have you come and join us. Right now, Jeff was, a friend of mine, Penny Dex, who's also a veteran, gave me your name and said that we needed to meet up and talk a little bit. Jeff is 28 years old, originally from Akron, Ohio. He joined the Army as a medic in '04 and was stationed at Fort Lewis and served 2 tours in Iraq. He became a conscientious objector in '08 and was honorably discharged from active service in '09 and has served another 1.5 years in the National Guard. Jeff has been doing counter-recruitment activism since December with the War Resisters League, a number of people that I've worked with over the years. And Jeff is currently an honors student at PSU, working through the GI Bill, and with an English major, writing minor, and an academic focus on critical race theory. Now, what is critical race theory?
Well, it's mainly the study that there's a systemic power struggle within our legal system. It just kind of naturally comes up within our culture to be, I guess it's the recognition of race is just kind of built into the system. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And then one of the things I want to go back to, so you were originally from Akron, Ohio. Mm-hmm. How long were you there? Did you just grow up your whole time there? Or?
Yeah, I moved around that general area. Yeah, I moved to Akron when I was 11, and then I was there till I was 18 when I left for the military.
Okay, and how was schooling and stuff then? What led you to join the military?
Well, if anybody would have asked me like 2 weeks before I graduated if I was going to join the military, I'd have said, don't talk to me. But after I got out and I had that summer, I was kind of thinking about it, what I'm going to do with myself. The military just kind of seemed like all signs were pointing in that direction, So it's kind of hard to say, what really was the biggest motivating factor, but I think the most important one was that I really just wanted to help, and see what was going on with my own eyes. Yeah.
Well, you chose a position of being a medic.
Mm-hmm.
So as a medic, of course, you had to deal with a lot of people that are dealing wounded, or were you in combat itself that you had to go out and somebody hollers medic?
No.
No?
Mm-hmm. Nope. It was mainly facilities.
So
mm-hmm.
they would come in and you would have to deal with
There were a few times that I had to actually go out, like an ambulance, to go out to the situation and help out. But yeah, there wasn't any. I wasn't specifically assigned to like a combat unit.
So when you say 2 tours, so
mm-hmm.
how long is a tour?
Well, they kind of changed over the years. My first one was 10 months and my second one was 15 months. They changed it up between the two. Yeah.
Did you have R&R in between that?
Yeah, they give you 2 weeks, and you can pretty much go anywhere in the world you want. They pay for your ticket to go, and then you have 4 days you can spend in guitar.
So where did you go?
Ohio. Both times I went home.
Well, you went home. Okay.
Yeah.
Was it hard to go back?
Yeah. It was hard. It was a struggle, but it was my mom. She was very supportive of me and helped me, motivate me to keep going. So.
Okay. So then, what was the process for you to become a conscientious objector? What led to that?
Well, my recruiter told me when I was very first on my way in that medic was going to be my best choice because they were the ones that had the best option of making that decision if they needed to make that decision at any point in their career. So that was kind of the medical focus was going to help me with that. And then in 2008, it didn't really come as a surprise to my unit that I was deciding to do this. I had been talking about it for quite a while. They all knew where my stance was on the situation. So I approached my commanding officer with the paperwork ready to go, and he assigned a second lieutenant who was basically in charge of making sure that all the paperwork went through. And I would say that it mostly started when I was on my first deployment. My biggest move towards it was when I started working in the detainee facility, when I was working actually directly with the Iraq detainees. And the more time I spent with them, it was kind of I had a sergeant at one point who got mad at me because I snapped my fingers at them while they were sitting on the floor, and I had seen the other soldiers doing that, so I was like, oh, that's how you get their attention. I don't know their language, so this is how you get their attention. Right. And she stopped me, and she said, you don't know. We're going to treat them differently than everybody else does. And I said, oh, that was like my first big wake-up call, that I was clearly being influenced by the people around me. And as I started to get closer to getting to know them, they were just incredibly kind and sweet people. And I mean, these were the ones that we were holding, for questioning.
Yeah.
And the CIA was coming in and talking to them, and the military contractors and things. And we never got any part of that. But they would come to us, and they would line up to come into our medical facility because we were kind to them, we were nice to them, and they really appreciated having being treated with respect for a little part of their day. And when we go around to give them their meds, they would rush all up, and we'd have sometimes we'd have suckers for them and stuff and give them out. And it really showed me that if these are really the worst of the people that we're supposed to be attacking here, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. So that's kind of where the questioning started. And then after I got back in garrison, I started talking to a lot of the guys that I was in my unit with, and I started reflecting on myself compared to who they were, and I started to really determine the decisions that I was going to start making. And I started actually verbalizing a lot of the stuff on duty to a lot of the people that I was working with. And some people were very annoyed, and a lot of them got angry at me for how I felt about it because they thought it was very disrespectful. But overall,
such as
just saying things like I don't really think that we need to be taking guns over there. I mean, I think that what these people need is a lot more education, compassion, understanding, and I thought a lot of the times, as we've talked before, that it's the authority figures that are making these decisions, that are telling people to act the way they do. And such kind, sweet people are very easy to listen and follow what these leadership happen to tell them. And I felt education could probably do a lot more just to empower these people to take care of themselves rather than having us come in there and do it for them. And so on my second deployment, I started asking around trying to find out, well, what steps are we taking to actually try and improve the conditions outside the wall? And somebody told me a story while I was on guard duty on the wall at one point that there were a couple hundred teachers that had been called in from America to come over and teach, but they sat around for weeks because nobody had anything for them to do, and they were just getting paid tons of money to just sit around and wait. And then when things actually did start getting taken care of, it was an extremely slow process, and a lot of the contractors just started leaving because they couldn't find the necessary resources to get the job done that they were asked to come over and do. I didn't really hear too much about it after that, but it really got me thinking personally that those teachers were doing more than I was. They were the ones who were coming over with an actual ability to give these people something that my weapon could not. And that was kind of the driving force behind saying, when I looked around at the guys and I saw them, and I looked, and I knew that if they were in trouble, I was not going to be able to protect them. I wasn't going to be able to shoot back and protect them. So I knew that it was necessary to let my commanding officers know that they couldn't trust my weapon outside the wall. And everybody understood. When the second lieutenant went around and did her interviews with everyone, they were all very supportive. They didn't agree with me at all, but they were all very supportive of my decision, because it was something that was, they saw the progression, because I verbalized myself to them as I went through this change. And yeah, once the ball actually got rolling, it was a lot easier to, I guess, get everything taken care of. But it was kind of getting started, making that initial decision that this is something that I want to do, because it's a pretty big statement, you know.
No, that's that's unusual too. I think that you had a little bit different experiences from other vets that I've talked to that were over there. When they decided that they were no longer going to participate in the war, they either got busted, got thrown in jail. Others, like there was a young man named McQuile who refused to carry his weapon while he was over there. Literally, the government went after them, and they had a hard time. So it looks like, the period of time of these various people that finally said no, maybe the military got the idea in their head, at least some did, that, better to let people go than to try and force them to do what they're doing. There was a movie out here recently, one of the professors at Portland State put together about psychiatrists or therapists that were working with veterans that were coming back from the field. They were dealing with post-traumatic stress or other kinds of stresses, and they were having the same kind of problems that you're talking about. They didn't want to be killing anybody, and the therapist would actually sit there, and their job was to just turn them around enough to say, "You're okay, go back out there and fight." And instead of saying, "We need to remove these people from the field. They can no longer be, as you said, trusted with a gun. They don't want to kill. They don't want to be a part of this." Or they ended up going out and committing suicide. And those that are forced to go out and not stand by their principles, come home and they deal with post-traumatic stress. And we know now that it's up to like 22 veterans a day that are committing suicide. So when you're talking, you're also talking to high school students, and when you're dealing with counter recruitment. So what are you talking to the students about? What do you say to them?
I guess we try and keep it casual, just talk to them. But I think the most important thing is just to let them know that there's no walls that they've been backed up against, to tell them that this is what they have to do. Just in the short time that I've been doing it, the family pushing them is usually kind of the one that I see the most. And yeah, I just tell them, I just want to make it known to them that they don't have to do it. There are other options that they can take.
In this world today, it seems like the options are so small.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a master's degree, and even I have a hard time. I'm not getting paid for the skills that I have, let's put it that way. And I've talked to so many kids that are coming out of college that are working as baristas or in some other service industries who, they're highly educated, highly skilled, and a few choices, and they've got a debt over their head. And I'm still paying for my own student loans, So when you think about those things, the military seems to be the only option for a lot of people. Help them pay for their school. When I was 19, I think I wasn't ever for war, and I think you said the same thing. It's it's like I couldn't I had to see for myself, and I also thought maybe I could make a difference. And shortly after I went in boot camp, I already knew I made a big mistake. I was a Marine, so they hassled us right off the bat. But at the same time, I got that idea. There's still the idea that you wanted to. When I got to Vietnam, it wasn't like I didn't run across gung ho people. And it sounds like with this officer, they were saying to you, don't snap your fingers. I had sort of the same kind of experience in the sense that, when I was out in the field and I was ready to fire my weapon after somebody had a round had been fired at us, a mortar round had been fired at us. And my squad leader said, I saw where it came from, and I said, and I was a machine gunner, so I was ready to just fire into the bush. And he says, wait. He missed us. If he missed us, it means they don't really know where we're at. It was at dusk. But if you fire your weapon, they're going to see those traces and you're going to find out where you are. He says, we are not here to fight for Ma, Pi, flag, or any of that stuff. Right now, we're just trying to stay alive. And if we have to, we fire back to save each other's lives. But that's it. And that's the kind of people I ran across, And it really changed the way I thought about what we were doing in Vietnam. And I don't know how that experience is for a lot of veterans, because I see these programs about, or documentaries, or like Black Hawk Down or something. Very aggressive kinds of language and racism towards the people that you're over there, ragheads, and all these various terms. And I was always opposed to racist language to begin with. But I needed to, of course I grew up with a lot of wrong ideas, and I had to unlearn a lot of things over the years, but I was still always opposed, looking to find a better way. And so it's good to hear that you ran across at least some people that were thinking the same way, and you're moving you in that direction. Were there any books that you were reading at the time that influenced you?
Well, actually, a lot of stuff. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was a really big one for me.
It's a good book. I read it.
The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that one. Literature around the 60s, the counterculture movement of the 60s, was really, I was reading heavily into that stuff at the time.
You have recommendations to people now that you're in college, reading some of these books?
But like I said, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, absolutely. It is, I mean, it changed a lot of my perspective on how I look at things. And as far as more contemporary stuff, I would say The Alchemist, Ishmael. Yeah. Those was very, very powerful books.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, I always find it when I'm talking to people that have sort of chosen a path towards peace, that often we've read either the similar books over a period of time, and because literature has a way of influencing people, but it also raises questions. What is the morality of life? How are we as human beings, going to exist in this world? And it doesn't often answer those questions, but it raises those questions. So philosophically, we begin to question, who am I? What am I doing? And not just that, but who am I within my country as a citizen, as a person in this country? We have this mentality, you're either with us or against us. And in the beginning, I know when we had the marches, some of the largest marches in history against the Gulf War, we had people were very, very supportive. And then once they went, it was kind of like people said, well, they're over there, we have to support the troops. And we had a lot of people that were very, very opposed to somebody who would be like with Veterans for Peace, saying, you guys aren't supporting the troops. Of course, our answer was, yeah, we're supporting the troops, bring them home, we were never, the old saying used to be, I don't know if you've heard that before, that you'll see these in the movies, when the veterans came back, they spit on us, they called us baby killers and all that. There may have been some cases like that, but for the majority, I never ran across that, and a lot of veterans I know never came across that. But what I did know is that people would be very respectful and ask me to, questions about the war. The things that bothered me was when they would ask you, did you ever kill anybody? Or the things that we hear today, thank you for your service. How do you feel when somebody says thank you for your service?
It's very confusing, I guess, is the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know if I'm supposed to represent the military when I reply. I don't know if I'm supposed to represent myself. If I was to represent myself, I would try and start up a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's necessarily the stuff that I would try and explain. I don't think they'd necessarily be able to understand. It's kind of the stuff where you kind of got to see it yourself. So my generic reply is thank you for thanking me. I just kind of flip it right back around because I guess to try and get into a conversation about it would be asking more than I think somebody usually wants when they give the textbook answer of thank you for your service. So I just try and keep it simple most of the time. If I'm where I really enjoy it is in the classroom environment.
Uh-huh.
When it's brought up there, it's clearly a place where we can communicate about how we feel and our personal experiences with it. And there can be a little bit of that personal touch that you don't get, say, when you're at the grocery store or something like that.
Well, I wanted to, there's, I've been in the classroom a number of times. Just recently I was at an event. I just wanted to see if I have it here. There was an event at Portland State, at PCC campus, Sylvania, January 18th. It was in celebration of the spirit of William Stafford, and called Making War No More. And there was a guy named Brian Ellis who was a student poet winner, and he gave me permission to post his poem, and I just want to read it to people here because it just really moved me a lot. It's called What We Broke. Second to the last time I saw Sully, I picked him up off the street. He jumped in my car, excited. Brian, guess what? I smoked crack last night. Now I've done every drug known to man. First time I met Sully, he was selling to me and my friends. He was on parole and too worried to carry a gun. So I carry this, he said. And in one fluid motion, he swept a hatchet from his pants and lodged it in our table. During that car ride, Sully told me he had enlisted. This was in 2002, and he said he was bound to end up killing anyway. Last time I saw Sully, he was on a shaky clip he emailed in a video. He and another soldier were standing in a doorway of a ramshackle classroom, lazy gunfire outside, regarding the bullets like angry insects. Sully kept sticking his face sideways in the frame, shouting, "What's up, Dad?" And the other soldier was shaking his automatic weapon like a pen running out of ink. "It's my birthday, man," he grunts. "All I want for my birthday is to pop one head." One head for my birthday. The video zooms in on the gun's viewfinder. We watch and wish, and that wish comes true. I suppose it's useful to send our killers to the other side of the earth and to put them to work like this. Easier anyway than fixing what we broke in them in the first place. Whew. Powerful poem. And you said you were writing, and I find that poetry and literature has so much power to say sometimes what we can't say just in a casual conversation. And one of the things that's coming up here, and I wanted to remind people here, is that as a Vietnam veteran, of course, I had arrived in Vietnam in around August of 1968. And the Tet Offensive actually had taken place before, and I just wanted to, let me see if I have that information here. Oh, it's over here. Now, the Tet Offensive was in 1968. It was one of the largest military campaigns in the Vietnam War. It was launched on January 30th, 1968, by the forces of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army against the South Vietnamese, the U.S. and their allies. It was called a surprise attack, and that was because there was an agreement on both sides to cease fire during the Tet Lunar New Year. This year, the Vietnamese New Year is going to be January 31st. And because I was thinking about Tet, there was a poem that I had wrote. And it deals with, I'm trying to deal with the idea of Tet. And then when I was looking up the history of not only the war, which was sort of decisive, and there was the beginning of the end of the Vietnam War. I wanted to know about the culture. I wanted to know more about the history of it. And I started looking up Tet as this New Year celebration. And I found there was various traditions that were being taken place. But I was wondering how we as Americans were involved in this. There was an ancient story of the myth of women warriors, these two young women who held off the Chinese. The Vietnam had been in through many, many wars and had been conquered many times and fought back and won their independence. So I always thought of them as Vietnam was always dancing with death. And so I call this the Waltz in the Valley of Death. Truong Chat and Truong Nhi, the daughters of old Vietnam, ferocious wildflowers, upon monstrous elephants, dance with war and death. A shy moon ellipses, casting no shadows. Tet appears for the festivities, harvesting jackfruits and betel nut smiles. Dragons breathe tongues of fire, piercing the nights. Sabers of lights pirouette. Dancing lions chase evil spirits away. Ghosts of ancestors are invited to feast. Uncle Sam comes bearing brooms, chase luck away with revenge. Rolling thunder of Boeing B-52s sweep away children of Vietnam. Puff the magic dragon tears flesh and bone indiscriminately. Operation Ranch Hand poisons jungles, crops, and pregnant mothers. Hamlets, towns, and cities perish. People are massacred. Marine and Army join the dance. Murder, rape, torture their tomb. The Truong sisters, once great warriors, weep on death's shoulders. Tears of blood run rivers red. Souls leave the dance of life. Choose wisely the partners in dance. Beware the tunes they whisper in your ear. Their kisses may be your last. It just was one of those things when I was reading about Tet, it inspired me to write that poem. But there's things in here, you know, the moon is sort of ellipses. They say that it doesn't cast any shadows on as Tet begins. And I went back to Vietnam in 2006, and just all these jackfruits and betel nut smiles were like Vietnamese women with these black teeth, you know, sucking on these betel nuts. And so all of these things just came rushing into my mind, you know, how we especially just bombed the hell out of that country. Almost 4 million people, Vietnamese, died, you know, through various methods over the years. And so many veterans, you know, we had 58,000 American veterans that died during the war, but so many have died after the war. And for me, since I live with the war every day, I don't know about you, but in living with that war every day, it's not just that war, it's every war that came after it. And so with dealing with post-traumatic stress, for me, was also dealing with not just the trauma of the violence that I saw, but the betrayal of my country telling me why I had to go there in the first place. And I see that happening to so many young Iraq and Afghan vets. As they go to a country they've been told they had to defend against, you know, we're going to bring democracy, they attacked us. We know Iraq didn't have anything to do with it. But at the same time, when people begin to investigate those things and begin to meet people face to face and understand we have different cultures and different languages and different beliefs, but that doesn't make it right for us to come in and wipe them out. And that betrayal is part of that post-traumatic stress for me. And each time I hear we go to war, I hear the same lies. And so as a Veterans for Peace, I'm looking for a way that we can speak to the people out there and say, you know, we got to find a way that we can end war. I don't know what those words are going to be that's going to compel people to join those kinds of movements in this world. But if they think about what it would be like for somebody to come to this country and attack us, you know, wouldn't we pick up arms to fight those people? Wouldn't we try to do everything we could to undermine whatever control they were trying to take over our country? Well, when we go to those countries, when I had to fight the Vietnamese, or you had to fight, or people had to fight in Iraq or Afghanistan, all I saw was the people defending their own homeland. And I can't understand when I see so many deaths that occur in these countries. And so often, too many times now, it's women and children that are the brunt of most of the, the violence. Whether it's indirect or direct, because it can be indirect. If you bomb the water supply, hospitals, and people don't have access to clean water, disease occurs, and people die because of that. There was also depleted uranium and other kinds of chemicals that were having to be destroyed. For me, in Vietnam, was Agent Orange. So Agent Orange was something that destroyed thousands of crops and poisoned the water, the land, and people and children were born with birth defects afterwards. Many veterans are, you know, I find dying from Agent Orange today. I had a child that was born with congenital heart disease, cleft palate, other abnormalities, and eventually had to go for heart surgery, who's with that heart surgery ended up with something went wrong and went into a coma, and 7 weeks later died in my arms. So at that moment I had this sort of, well, not at that moment. At that moment I was very angry and very confused. My whole world had fallen out from underneath me. Not unlike leaving Vietnam. I mean, and seeing that betrayal. You don't have any place to put your feet back down on because you used to believe a certain way, and that doesn't exist anymore for you. You see something different. It took a while to grab onto something. I grabbed onto my family, and then when that was pulled out from underneath me, it was trying to hold on to the family I had left that kept me sane enough not to put a bullet in my head, you know. And then I think, you know, after my wife and I went to the coast just to sort of grieve, and family came, they said to me, you know, you guys need to get away. And I remember I probably told this story a dozen times, but it's a good time to start with, especially with Tet coming up, is that my wife and I were walking on the beach, and all of a sudden it's like I had an out-of-body experience, and I was in a different world, and I was traveling past time, and I was seeing all these wars that took place over history. And you know, I was raised with this sort of biblical idea of the beginning of the world, and I came to the Garden of Eden, basically, and Eve was holding her dead son, Abel, in her arms. Cain, the brother, had just killed. And she let out a scream that that shook the entire universe, and even God trembled. And the angels began crying, and they filled the oceans, and it started lapping at my feet and brought me back to reality. And at that point, a very mythical story, but at that point I realized, you know, that I could no longer participate in any war that kills other people's children. And the only time I would even think picking up a weapon was to protect my own family. And other than that, I never want to see a gun again. I never want to see our tax dollars going for weapons. And it's just, you know, it's the hardest thing for me to deal with in this world, because you know how hard it is for people to try and grasp what grief is. And you, as a medic, you're dealing with people that are dying in your arms. And even when you don't know somebody, That's very, very, very hard to deal with. How did that affect you? I mean, I hate to move from that to that, but I mean, you know, this is you're here, and you need to, you know, I want you to tell your story and how you feel about these things, because I think people out there need to know.
I would say the first experience of dealing with, you know, in the ER was one where a mortar had gone off right outside the embassy in Baghdad, and I believe it was the embassy, and they brought just a ton of patients came pouring in, and when they brought him in, they basically called this guy expectant. He was an Iraqi national, and they basically said he's not going to make it, so you just do CPR for as long as you can. And so when I went to go do CPR, he was already, you know, everything was already as bad as it could get. His ribs had been crushed from the CPR being done on him already, and he had a couple of puncture wounds. And every time I would do compressions, the blood would kind of pull up around my hands. And I kept looking at this guy. I wanted to tell him, like, I'm sorry, you know, I'm doing all I can. And he couldn't understand me. He didn't, you know English. And I just slowly watched him, and he was like pushing back with his trying to breathe, you know, and so I was trying to do CPR, and he was pushing back with his lungs, and I felt like I was doing more harm than good, but I just kept doing it, and the nurse kept, you know, looking at me, and, you know, just keep going, and then I finally kind of watched the light go out in his eyes, you know, and I can't really say that I still carry that with me in a painful way, because I know that I want to do good with that experience. I want to take that, and I want to, even though I don't have a lot of, you know, experiences, the little ones that I do have are so big for me that they're good enough for me to go forward with wanting to say no. There's a lot of other guys, though, even in that particular instance, a couple of my friends, that after that experience, they weren't the same anymore. They were the ones that had that rode up on the scene in the ambulance and taken the guys out, and that was, as far as I knew, that was our unit's, you know, as far as recently, that was our unit's closest big situation when that went down. And there was a lot of whispers after that a couple of those guys, they never really came back from that situation, and they kind of carried that one with them for a long time. I don't know if they still are. I don't really keep in contact with a lot of the guys from my unit anymore. But yeah, I've tried to think as much as I can on that situation, and know that I didn't do that, and I don't want to add to anything that might continue that happening. And I could never imagine having been the person that took that action, and knowing that person's life is forever on me. You know, that's kind of the way I look at it, is once you take another person's life, everything that person was ever going to do, good or bad, you carry that with you. That is now your responsibility. You made the ultimate judgment call that person is not redeemable, that they have to be gone. And in war, it's slightly skewed, because you're doing it because you're told, and there's so much ideology behind the message of being told to take that course of action.
That's right.
And when we ask people to do that, I think that the person, the soldier that is created in order to carry out an action like that, has become so distant from the civilian, the normal social contract following person that we're supposed to be. That is, to me, that is where the rise in suicide is coming from. It's coming from the fact that we're asking men and women to go and take on the lives of other people that are, at the end of the day, just defending their homes, defending themselves, their families, exactly what you said you do. And we're asking these soldiers to do these things and carry these people's lives with them, never really knowing if that person was ever actually out to get them personally. There's never any real connection. It's the most intimate act, but in war, it's so incredibly distant from what you're doing. And to ask somebody to carry that burden with them for the rest of their lives, and always question why they made that choice, it's sometimes it's too tearing. It's too opposite from what we ask them to be from the child. to share and give of yourself and be respectful. All these acts that we're told to be as a child are in complete contrast to what we're asking soldiers to be on the battlefield. And in order to do what we're doing today, I think the moral obligation that comes with military service is almost non-existent at this point, in my opinion. So that separation from having a moral center and making that decision, it tears a person in two different directions. And some people can't reconcile that pain that we're asked, that we are asking them to give for us, to go over. If you're not speaking out against it, then you are complicit in allowing it to happen. And it's us asking them to do it for us.
Very powerful. Thanks. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a difficult thing to try and explain to somebody who hasn't experienced it, and yet people experience it in ways. They have family members. They have wives and girlfriends and mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who then live with those veterans when they come back home and try to, I'm sure all meaning well, but having to deal with the problems that people carry with them. And too often vets shut themselves down from trying to explain this to people, and become isolated. I do try when I talk to people and run into people is to try and tell them to, don't let the stigma of going to a therapist stop you. Please, take that time. I go to a therapist once a month, and I didn't do that till about 2008. I started simply because other veterans and other people made that available to me, and for many years I was just in denial, and I didn't want to deal with anything that had anything to do with the VA or veterans or talk about these things. I might talk about other social concerns, human rights violations against people in Latin America, or racism or sexism or various things like that, but I wouldn't talk as a veteran. And then I found I could not talk as a veteran. I had to tell, because too often people would be up there and people, they don't know what they're talking about. They were talking against the war. That they've never been, they don't know, And there would be these gung-ho people, these right-wingers, that just make fun of the lefties and the hippies. And finally it just kind of been, I was there, I can tell my story. You make up your own mind. Even when I talk to kids in the classroom, it's not, some will still decide to go in, but I just want them to know that if they change their mind, they always can. There are certain rights that they have. If somebody asks you to do something that is against your principle morally, don't do it just because you've been ordered to do it. That's what they train you to do. There's a great book by Lieutenant Grossman called On Killing, in which he talks about how the military has to train people to kill, because in various wars we've had over the years, and he goes back from Roman period to today, was that most people, if they're face to face with somebody, couldn't pull the trigger. They would hesitate. Oftentimes, like in the Civil War, people would fire in the air, fire around people. Most of the killing was from long guns, cannons, and or people when they were running away and firing from a distance, So they had to begin to train people to kill by order. You are told to. And even when I was in Vietnam, like I said, when I was ready to fire, I didn't have the order to fire. I probably would have done it if they had ordered me at that time. I just happened to have somebody who knew that that wasn't the best thing to do at that time. But then I didn't know that until I got out of the service, that I was trained to just click like that. And I don't know what I would have done if face-to-face with somebody, I hope to think I wouldn't, but then I might not be here today. That's another thing. So you deal with these issues. So the thing that for me is, like when people say, they'll say, there's a cure for post-traumatic stress if you do this meditation or you do this kind of thing. And I don't think that's possible, because that's like erasing your memory. That's erasing the truth. There's ways to deal with it. We talked about this before, this post-traumatic growth, which is taking what you have, this experience, which is normal. Anybody, that's another thing. They treat it like it's a disease, but if you experience something like you do in combat and war, it's a normal reaction. Your body, your mind, and everything is trying to tell you something. And I can be at a place and not know why I'm depressed, and even begin shaking or crying, and then it's my therapist made me aware that there's body memory. Even though I'm not thinking about it, a date or a time, my body remembers I was at a certain place at a certain time when something happened. And so for you, some of you veterans who may be experiencing this, you may think you're going crazy, but really your body's trying to tell you something. And when you begin to understand that, you can say, now I know, I've got to say, what happened? What does this remind me of? And you begin to at least be able to cope with it. I hope that's of some help to people out there. But, go get help. Kelly, here, my producer, had gotten a call by somebody. She was at a clinic, and this guy actually called up and was very suicidal. And she called me because she was having a hard time. She didn't know what to say to this guy. He was a veteran. He was back Eastern Washington, and so I put a message out to vets. I don't know if anybody was able to reach him or not, because I didn't know what to say to this guy. I didn't know how to really contact him, but I did contact another vet who had gone through. He's down in Bend, Oregon, and I've had him on the program. Who went through his own sort of experience as somebody who was close to suicide, and he came to the point. He says, "It's not me who needs to die," and then he wrote a song called "Dead Poets," dead politicians, not soldiers. And but he did reach out. He did try to reach out to that guy. He sent me a text telling me he tried to reach out to the guy, but he wasn't available. So, the main thing is, if you do hear about something, try to get them some help. Try to talk to them if you can. If you can't, because it is a difficult thing to talk to somebody if they're not another vet. Vets can talk to each other sometimes where they can't talk to a civilian. I know I was up at the VA, and one of my doctors said to me, "Thank you for your service." And I said, No. Please don't thank me for my service. I'm telling you that it makes me feel uncomfortable, because what you're thanking me for killing people, and I don't want to be thanked for killing people. And I didn't think of it at the time, but I did wish I had said to him, "Thank you for helping veterans," which would have been the best response, but I didn't. And if they're listening, now you know. And I can deal with people saying "welcome home," or just treat me like anybody else on the street. It's no different. I don't want any special privileges because of that. There's also, when you're talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, we talk about, there was Abu Ghraib, and we had the torture. And all the lies of saying they weren't doing these things until the pictures came out. And these horrible, horrible things that were done to people. And then we have these detainees down in Guantanamo. Again, you say we don't know if many of these people were really guilty of anything. Most of them have been found not guilty of anything, weren't charged with anything, and been even time for them to be released, and they're still being held. They were going on a fast for a while, a hunger strike, and here in Portland we were supporting that. But Veterans for Peace nationally is, is picked up from one of our chapters in the UK. Ben Griffin and his veterans, British soldiers, who became a chapter of Veterans for Peace, so we have an international chapter there, started a rolling fast every Friday in support and solidarity to release the prisoners of Guantanamo. People here they're asking people to get involved. There's a young man, if you go to our Veterans for Peace, website, VFP chapter72.org, you'll see this sort of Portland Rolling Fast issue statement. And there's a young man who, his name is Jimmy Tardy, who joined Brian Wilson when he was doing this fast. He just, was active in helping the homeless and ran across Brian doing this and got involved and had become really outspoken in it. And he wrote this piece. I just want to see where it begins here. He makes this statement. We, the underside, make the following statement. We fast in order to affirm that we do not agree with the unlawful detention and torture of innocent men in Guantanamo, Cuba, by the United States military. We are demonstrating that we take seriously the things that are done in our name, that we will not turn away from injustice, which we recognize as our responsibility, just what you were talking about. We are making it known that we are aware and that we are not okay with this. We demand that the situation no longer continue. We are proud to be in the company of others who will not simply accept the actions of the powerful. We will not roll over. We will not go along to get along. In order to right this outrage, there is much to be done. We are starting where we can, in our own bellies, in our own minds, in our own hearts. Our rolling fast is a part of an international Guantanamo solidarity movement that includes, among other actions, and ongoing Veterans for Peace led Fast on Friday actions. If you'd like to join the efforts of this solidarity and witness here in Portland, please contact Jimmy Tardy. He's got a phone number here, 503-432-0116. Or there's again, if you go to the Veterans for Peace website, chapter72.org, that is up on our website. You can contact Jimmy through that. He's got an email, and you can get involved. If we're gonna make a difference, we need to let people know. Also, since I was talking about Agent Orange and Vietnam, there's a new bill out. I'm with through Veterans for Peace. I went back on a delegation to Vietnam in 2006 with the Vietnamese Agent Orange Relief and Responsibility Campaign. And I've been on their core committee here for a few years now. And we just put forward a new bill, which is out there. We're going to ask people to try and support that. It's been 50 years after the first spraying of Agent Orange in Vietnam, and it continues to kill and maim Vietnamese and Americans. Legislation has been introduced into the House for the first time addressing the ongoing health problems of Vietnamese children of U.S. veterans. And when I said my child was born with these diseases related to Agent Orange, as a male veteran, these were denied. Now they're finding out with new science that it is very much directly involved. And there's another organization that I work with as Children of Vietnam Veterans. They have their own website called Children of Vietnamese Veterans Health Alliance. And these are children who now in their 20s and 30s are sons and daughters of Vietnam veterans whose fathers were over there and who have abnormalities, hands and fingers missing, and other internal diseases. And so we've designed this bill to address that issue, to start recognizing male veterans also for a number of these diseases, because they only recognized spina bifida. But in women, they recognize a number of other diseases. So this bill is called H.R. 2519, Victims of Agent Orange Relief Act of 2013. And it was introduced by veteran Congress member Barbara Lee, and supported by I forget how many congressmen right now. But it's an opportunity for people to talk to their local representatives and to ask them to support that. Just one more thing I wanted to say. You know, we're going to be finishing up here real quick. I've got about 3 minutes. When we're talking about ending war, you know, I was saying it's so important we can find a way to do that. I did an interview with David Swanson, who wrote a book called War No More, and he's put together a national website called Beyond War. I think we have that. There it is up on the screen. Contact that. It's a movement he's got every argument that you can possibly imagine that people say there's no way we can end war. Well, at one point in time in history, we actually had a number of countries came together and wrote laws to outlaw war. And if it could be done then, even though it failed to have its legal influence upon countries, it was remarkable that people came around to support that. And if we can get people to begin to look that there is an alternative, then we can do that. So please check out the website, sign on either as an organization or as an individual, and we can begin to create an international movement, peace movement. Is there any last words you'd like to say? I want to thank you for being here, and I'll let you say the last few words here.
I guess all I have to say is I do think that with the wonderful creativity that we have in this nation, I do think we can come up with better answers than what we've been choosing to do. And I think that as a force, there's enough people that we can get together and we can make some pretty serious changes, but people have to stand up and say what they believe.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming here and for standing up and saying what you believe.
Thank you.
Thank you again, folks. We'll see you next the next fourth Saturday of the month, and I'm looking to have a guest, a woman veteran from Vietnam, Arlene, sorry, I can't remember, Edwards, I believe is the last name, and she does a program on KBOO. So thank you very much, and I hope you join us again.